Hey guys, I'm here to talk about Noah and why he had to stay in the hospital for 4 days. Alright, so Noah had his 2-month checkup on Tuesday, September 15th. And Noah got his shots on the 15th as well. I don't want anybody commenting on this video telling me how bad shots are or I should look into it more. We vaccinate our kids. I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't want to hear anything else about it. He also had all his other regular 2-month checkup kind of stuff. So we went home. The next day on Wednesday, he got a fever, which is normal. You get a fever usually when you get your shots. Myah had a fever and Noah had a fever or whatever. Well, later on Wednesday night, Noah had spiked a fever to 102.3. So we called the nurse line and they said, that's a little high for a 2-month-old and especially for shots. So why don't you just bring him into urgent care? We brought him to urgent care, which urgent care is also connected to the emergency room. They usually tell you if you go to urgent care or emergency room depending on your situation. So the nurse checked out Noah and said that he would have to be in the emergency room for his age and for his fever, because a fever that young in a baby is not good. And it's not the fever itself that's not good, it's what's causing the fever in his little body, because you know you don't want an infection of some sort. So they ran a bunch of tests. They did an x-ray, they did a urine, blood work, everything. And they couldn't find nothing at all. So they sent us home and they said it was more than likely due to the shots. So Thursday came around and he was fine. He didn't really have a fever. Friday came around, September 18th. He spiked another fever. And so instead of bringing him into urgent care or the emergency room, we just decided to bring him into his normal clinic. His fever that day was 101 point something. And he shouldn't have had a fever still if it was from the shots. So it was obviously something else, not the shots. So we brought him in and they checked everything again, except for they didn't do any blood work or x-ray or urine. They just checked his ears and eyes and everything like that. And she said, looks good, everything looks good. He probably just has a little sickness of some sort. And if he still has a fever, on Monday to bring him back in. So weekend goes by and Noah seemed perfectly fine. He seemed healthy. He didn't seem fussy really. He didn't seem like he had a fever at all. We didn't really check because he didn't feel warm. I have like a piece of hair. We didn't really check. Monday comes around. He is fussy, but we thought, you know, he's just a fussy baby. Tuesday came around and he spiked another fever. He was crying all night long. We couldn't get him to stop. And for some reason we just we like totally forgot to check his temperature. But he was fussy all night long. And so finally we checked his temp and it was back up to 101, 102. And so we brought him back into urgent care, which then they said he had to go to the emergency because of his age and they don't know what's causing it. This time at emergency, all they did was blood work, and everything in his blood work came back completely fine. Wednesday rolled around and he was fine. He didn't seem fussy. He didn't seem like he had a fever. We didn't check. I should have checked. Then Thursday comes and he's been really sleepy these couple days too. I'm just gonna add that in there. And all day Wednesday he's very sleepy. That's why I didn't check. I just assumed he was tired, you know, whatnot. And so Thursday came around and he was still very, very sleepy. He slept all morning. He woke up at about 11 o'clock just screaming bloody murder. And so I instantly, you know, tried to calm him down. Like, he was probably really hungry, so I started breastfeeding him. As I was breastfeeding him, I noticed that he was just so warm. Extremely, extremely warm. So I instantly took his temp and it was 103.5. To be honest, I started just crying. I didn't know what was wrong with him. I didn't know. This has been going on now for how many days? This was on Thursday, so it was going on for 9 days. 9 days of an on and off fever. I was just crying. So I called Gage and I said, you have to get home immediately. He has to go in. This is not right. And I called my mom to come pick up Myah on Thursday. She left work early. And we were debating if we bring him down to Children's Hospital instead of the hospital where we usually go. We usually go to the hospital where I delivered both my kids. We usually go to that hospital. You know, Children's Hospital is way downtown and whatnot. And I was like, you know what, let's just bring him into urgent care first and see what they say. So we brought him into a different urgent care this time because the urgent care at our hospital doesn't open up until 6. So this was at noon. We brought him into a different urgent care in the same clinic, if that makes sense. It's like the same clinic name, just a different location. So we brought him in and the doctor was amazing. He was like, you know, this is not normal. This is not normal at all. He got our story and he basically said, I'm going to send you back to the emergency room, back at our hospital. I'm like, ugh, again, like all I was thinking in my head was, something needs to be done. I'm not leaving without answers. Like, he is a 2-month-old baby boy who has had an on and off fever for 9 days. There's something wrong. This is not due to the shots. We have to figure this out. So we got to the hospital emergency room at about 1:45, and that was just torture. The doctor from urgent care had called the on-call doctor at the emergency room, letting him know we were coming. They sent us a letter and everything. We were waiting for 2 hours. Right before we got called back, we went up to the receptionist lady and we said, you know what, we're leaving. This is ridiculous. Noah on Thursday morning vomited all over me in the morning, and then he had not had a dirty diaper. He had wet diapers, but he did not have a dirty diaper in 2 days. And so while we were at the hospital waiting for 2 hours, he finally had a poopy diaper, and Gage decided to take his temp again, and it was back down to 98. So we were like, okay, he's fine. Should we just get going? This is ridiculous. This is 2 hours long now. And we told the receptionist or whatever, and she's like, okay. And then finally someone came out and they said, we're ready to take him back. Do you want us to take him back? And I looked at Gage and I said, well, I mean, his temperature was 98 because we brought our own thermometer, just to make sure our thermometer wasn't wrong, that we were getting all these inaccurate readings. So I was like, well, I mean, if they're going to take him back, might as well get him checked out. That's when everything just went downhill, and I'm so thankful that we did not go home, that we let them check him out. So they brought us back to a room. They took urine sample again, which is extremely hard because if you guys know, in babies that young, they have to put a catheter in just to get a urine sample. They took blood work. There was no need for an x-ray. They just did the blood work. So we're waiting and waiting, and then the doctor came in and said that his white blood cell count was really high. It was at 32, which I didn't realize they go by thousand, so it was at 32,000. But they just said 32, so we're just going to say it in 2 numbers, not the thousand. So it's at 32, and the normal range is anywhere, you cannot, anything over 15 is not good. Anything over 15 is not good, and Noah's was at 32. So he was extremely sick. There was something in his little body that was not right. So I had no idea what that meant. I just knew that he was sick. I was, you know, whatever. And so they started hooking him up to IVs to get fluid. This was all in the emergency room, and finally, at least we finally got answers, you know. They started hooking him up to IVs and to get fluid and to get antibiotics in him. And the doctor came back, and I said, you know, It makes me want to cry because I know there's parents that are actually dealing with this, but the doctor has to be honest about everything. And she brought up the possibility of it possibly being cancer, leukemia, because usually that affects the white blood cells. So she brought up the possibility of it possibly being cancer, being leukemia, and I just wanted to cry. We had to leave the room because they had to do a spinal tap on him because they wanted to know where this was coming from, why his white blood cell counts were so high. And I couldn't be in there for a spinal tap. So we waited in the waiting room, and they said, you know, it should take no more than 10 minutes. We waited for a half hour, and I was becoming buggy. I started crying. I'm trying not to cry right now. And remember, he's only 2 months old. He's still basically a newborn. Finally called us back, and they said that they couldn't get any fluid out of his spine, which would have determined if he had a bacterial infection, a viral infection, or if it could have been possibly something else. I was really hoping that they would have got the fluid out, because then my mind would have been at peace knowing if it was just a viral infection and not something else. So they couldn't get that, and, you know, they said how he is, they want to admit him overnight, and we'll talk to the doctor, the pediatrics doctor, in the morning. Night, that was in my head, was the possibility of my baby boy having leukemia, having cancer. It was Thursday night he got admitted. Friday morning, the doctor came in. Gage had to go to work, so my mom and my sister were there with us. And Noah's still on antibiotics twice a day. And she came in and she said, you know, we don't know what this is. We think it's best that he stays here till Sunday. And we had just gotten admitted last night on Thursday. So Gage and I were hoping that he would go home the next day. We never thought that he would have to be there that long. And then, of course, the doctor had to bring up again the possibility of it being leukemia, and that they were testing his blood to see, you know, whatever, if it was there. In that morning, Friday morning, she said, so far, so good, that it's nothing, that it's not leukemia, that it's not cancer, but they were going to double check and make sure. Gage wasn't there. It was just my mom and my sister, and like when she started, you know, talking even about that, about, you know, I just started crying, and then my mom started crying. It's just because you don't want that for your baby, you know, and I know parents are going through that right now. All the nurses, they were so nice to Noah, you know. Noah is so smiley, and another thing, he just didn't seem sick. He just didn't seem sick. He was smiling, he was flirting with all the nurses, giving them big smiles and coos. The nurses were great. They found a bouncer for Noah, so he didn't have to just lay in the hospital crib. They found a little wagon so we could take him on walks, which is so heartbreaking, because if you guys are following us on Instagram, every time he left that room he had to wear a face mask because they didn't know what it was. So he was not under quarantine or anything. He was just, if he left the room he had to wear that, and we weren't allowed to bring our water cups to go fill them. We had to have them brought to us just in case, because they didn't know what he was sick with, because they done everything, so they didn't want him to get anybody else sick. So we took Noah on little wagon rides around the second floor at the hospital, and he got to sit in his little bouncy chair. And when we took him on a little walk, we had to bring his little IV pusher, like the big long thing. And Saturday morning came around, and Noah was doing great. He hadn't had a fever since we got there on Thursday. Antibiotics were working great, we thought, and, you know, And we were thinking, you know, maybe Saturday we could go home. He hasn't had a fever. And we were waiting to see if his white blood cell count had went down. They had took more blood on Saturday morning. They took more blood Saturday morning. And Gage and I were just praying that it was going down. Because if it was going down, then that means it was some sort of viral or bacterial infection, and then the antibiotics were working and that they were going down. If they weren't going down, then that meant something more serious. So they took his blood Saturday morning, and we got the results back that his blood cell count was back down to 9. Thank goodness. Gage and I were so overwhelmed with happiness, and you know, knowing that our little boy is getting better, and whatever it is, his body is fighting it off. So then we were really hopeful that maybe we could go home, but the doctor came in and said that he wants to keep Noah again overnight, and this was Saturday night. And yeah, so we just hung out some more. He was still on his antibiotics, his fluids. Sunday morning came around, and we finally got to go home. The doctor came in and told us we could go home, but we have to have him on amoxicillin for 10 days. They don't know what made him sick. They don't think it was the shots. It was just some infection that they don't know what it was. They really don't. It's still a mystery to us today. But he's doing good. He's sleeping right now. No fever. Which is the biggest thing. If he has a fever, that's another thing. The doctor said if he has another fever when he goes home, you know, in this short little time, to bring him back in, and it's probably something then in his kidneys or in his bones. So we're praying still that he doesn't get another fever, that this was just a sickness. Like I said, he has to be on amoxicillin for 10 days. But yeah, I mean, it was a long weekend that we didn't expect. We thought we were just going to go into urgent care on Thursday, and they found something and just give us antibiotics and go home. We never expected our baby to be admitted for 4 days. But he's doing good. He's doing better. He's still his happy little self. He turned 3 months old in the hospital. In the hospital, he learned to grab things, and that's another way he was flirting with his nurse. He was pulling his little hospital gown up and showing his little belly and putting it back down. It was the cutest thing. So, yeah, if you guys have any questions for me, just leave them down below. Go follow us on our Facebook and Instagram. I have a lot more updates on there as well. But yeah, so far Noah's doing good. If anything changes, I will for sure let you guys know. But yeah, thank you for all the prayers for Noah. Honestly, that was probably the hardest and scariest time, not knowing what was wrong with him. And we still don't know, but he's better. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Like I said, leave your questions down below, and we will see you in our next video. Bye.